G'day, it's Paul McWilliam, and this is Adelaide Real, a guide to getting your fit together. And I'm very lucky to be joined today by Brock Armstrong. Now, Brock is another fellow from the, the Commonwealth. You know,
yes.
So Brock is from Vancouver in British Columbia. Is that right, in Canada?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Now, Brock is the host of the Get Fit Guy Quick and Dirty Tips podcast, which is a fantastic podcast if you are looking to get fit or you're already fit. It's really short, not really short, but really concise and to the point, and great topics that Brock discusses. So we'll talk about that a bit later in terms of promoting all that sort of stuff. But that's how I came to know of Brock, was in my journey looking for some advice and some information. And we've talked about it before. You know, the internet's a bit of a murky, muddy pool in terms of finding the right information. And, you know, I've found that Brock's podcast has been really helpful. So thank you for that, Brock. That's a bit of a rambling introduction, but welcome to Adelaide Real. Great to have you here.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's the middle of the afternoon here, first thing in the morning for you. So we're hopefully on equal levels of brain activity at this point.
Hopefully with the matching energy levels.
Yeah.
So now you've been in the fitness and wellness industry for quite a while now, Brock, but it hasn't always been an easy road for you, has it? You weren't always the fittest and healthiest person.
No, I mean, you know, and what I've learned over my journey and what I really try to bring to the Get Fit Guy podcast and everything else that I work on is the notion that we're a little skewed in the way that we view health and fitness and wellness and all of that stuff. We tend to lump it all together into, if you're slim and you look good in a t-shirt or whatever, you're good, done.
Yeah.
But it's not so at all. And I know that better than anyone, being my first profession out of high school was as a professional ballet dancer.
Wow. Okay.
You don't run across many more lean people, you don't run across ballet dancers very often, period. But
that's right.
When you look at them and you see them on stage, you think, oh yeah, like they're lean, their musculature is showing, they can leap and do all this kind of wonderful stuff. And I was one of those people. I could definitely do that. But I was not healthy. I was not well. I was not taking care of myself, really. Like, all we were focused on was being able to look good in our tights and basically like lift girls over my head and twirl a lot. And that was great. It was really fun. It was amazing. It definitely started me on a path of wanting to maintain a certain level of fitness and agility and mobility and flexibility and all that stuff that we really want to concentrate on. But my health was terrible. My diet was appalling. I would sit down and literally eat an entire Black Forest cake. Usually half. I'd usually half it with my roommate, but still, that would be dinner because we were just ravenous, and our brains would be freaking out saying, give me glucose, give me fuel.
Yeah.
And so we'd smoke during the day to curb our appetite, and drink coffee and stuff to keep us going. But then in the evening, you basically like would freak out and eat a whole bunch of Kraft dinner, or I guess macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
And maybe a T-bone steak if we could get our hands on one, or half a Black Forest cake. So, but that was sort of a rambling way to get at that. I think through my journey, I've really realized what good health, good fitness, real well-being is really about. And it has so much more to do than just being thin. And just looking good in your t-shirt or your jeans or whatever. And maybe that's because I'm getting older now. I turned 47 last week, so I'm creeping up on
You're
50.
Only a young fella.
Thank you. Yes, it's all relative, right?
Correct.
But yeah. So that's really where I started, was in the ballet and dance world, and I've since moved on to endurance sports and done some Ironman, some triathlon, a whole bunch of marathons and things like that, and sort of came out the other end having a much more, I think, robust and realistic view of what fitness really is.
How did you come out of the ballet world? How were your feet when you came out of there?
Not bad. Luckily, boys, like men in general, come out of ballet a little less battered than the women do.
Right.
Just because they have to wear those toe shoes, the point
Yeah.
shoes that
Oh,
actually
and you
have.
don't wear those.
No, well, some men do. I wore them very briefly because I was sort of, my niche was pas de deux, so I was partnering a lot
Right.
of the women. So I wanted to understand what it felt like. So I did take some classes in the point shoes, but in general, men don't wear the point shoes. So we do get away with having a little healthier feet in some ways.
Because I was just thinking, going into endurance sport, you're on the back foot if you've got poor feet to start with. That would have been a struggle.
I had to completely relearn how to run though, because I was running I was running on my toes with my feet turned out like a duck.
That's right. That funny run when they run onto stage.
It looks wonderful, but it's not an efficient or effective way to run a marathon. You end up destroying your hips and your lower back and your knees and everything. You keep that up for 42 kilometers.
Specific skill set.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked lovely, but I was not getting any good times. We'll put it that way. My first running coach, she watched me run on the treadmill and she just looked stunned. She's like, I don't know how you don't trip yourself every step.
What is going on?
Years of practice. That's how.
Fair enough. So what age were you when you transitioned out of the ballet?
I was in my early 20s. I actually had an injury that sidelined me for enough time that I sort of found some different things, got into acting, got into music a little bit and stuff too. But yeah, I had 5 stress fractures in my foot and ended up dislocating my hip because I was using my body so improperly. Yeah. There's a certain amount of hubris, I guess, with the youth that I just kept thinking, oh, I'll be fine. I can get through this. And eventually my body said, screw you, you're sidelined now. Now you can heal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It has a good way of doing that, doesn't it, your body?
Yeah, the body is pretty darn smart. When it's not being incredibly stupid, it's actually quite intuitive.
And then further, when was it? Because you had some heart issues too, didn't you, at one stage?
Well, and that was really what got me into endurance sports. And it was I need to go and find the cardiologist that said this to me, but it was an offhanded comment from my cardiologist. After I got through and I can talk about the heart problems a little bit more, but after I got through sort of the worst of it and was having a bit of anxiety still, like thinking, no, it's not over. I'm still sick. My cardiologist actually said to me, you know what you need to do is run a marathon or something to prove to yourself that you're okay, because you're okay. Like everything's fine now. You've come out the other end and you're fine. And I guess the only thing I heard was you need to run a marathon. So I called my cousin who had done triathlons and stuff and said, how do I do a marathon? What should I do to train for a marathon? So he started training me he was living very far away from me at the time. And we just sort of did it via the internet.
Yeah.
And I ran my first marathon in 2007, I believe it was, maybe 6. Can't remember now, but it was, it wasn't pretty, but I got it done. Crossed the finish line and immediately said, I'm never doing one of those again. And I've done, I think, 60 some since then. So.
You're bitten by the bug, because they say it can go either way, don't they? You're one and done, or you get the bug and you keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely got the bug, and it progressed into full-blown triathlon fever, Ironman, and all of that kind of stuff as well, which is not healthy. And I don't want to present this as a way to get healthy. It was a way for me to get mentally healthy after my health challenges, but it's really not a great way to increase your fitness in a really sustainable and healthy way. It's too much. It's too much. We really don't need to be doing that much running, especially. But
there was a phase there at one stage, and I don't exactly remember when it was happening, but there was a lot of triathletes just falling over dead, weren't they? Dropping dead because of poor.
I wouldn't say training. A lot. And it wasn't a lot of them, but there definitely have been. Well, you look at any sport, really, and there's a thing called left ventricle hypertrophy. So your left ventricle actually gets hypertrophy the same way that a bicep would or something, and it yet the muscle grows to the point where it's actually restricting blood flow and can cause sudden death. And a number of endurance athletes have suffered from that over the years. Some very high profile ones in the past have had that problem and other problems.
Yeah.
And that's only really one of the reasons why I don't necessarily, if somebody comes to me and says, I want to run a marathon so I can lose some weight, I'm like, okay, wait.
Yeah, right.
You've got two different goals here as far as I see it. One is to lose weight and one is to run a marathon. They're not the same goal. Don't confuse those two, please. Yeah. They're not synonymous. You don't have to run a marathon to lose weight. And
to lose weight.
Actually, not a good way to do it.
So you would say, look, let's work on losing the weight first, and then maybe the marathon is one of the things that you might do later on your bucket list.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. I mean, I never would convince somebody to not climb their personal Mount Everest or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
But those kinds of things are not running a marathon is not the healthy way to lose the weight, and doing it at the same time is often a problem as well. If you have a significant amount of weight to lose, doing that first is definitely the way to do it. And I always like to say there needs to be an exit strategy. If you run a marathon to lose weight, what do you do when the marathon's over?
Right.
Are you going to gain the weight back? Probably. Are you going to run another marathon? Well, maybe, but are you going to do that for the rest of your life? There needs to be, the intervention has to be something sustainable. The way that you get your weight down and you maintain that healthy weight needs to be something that you can literally do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I doubt you're going to run a marathon every 2 months for the rest of your life. Yeah. And if you are, that's amazing. And
and so we talk about your why a lot on this podcast. Why, if you're someone that's unwell or unfit, why do you want to change that? And wanting to do a marathon is probably not a big enough why, is it, for lifelong change?
No, that's a very, very short-term goal. Yeah. And those are great. Short-term goals are very fun and admirable and all that kind of stuff, but it's not something that's going to get you to, like fit at 50 or fit at 60 or 70 or so on. Yeah. That needs to be a much more sustainable.
Yeah, and they can be just little measuring posts along the way, though, can't they? Like, you can set yourself a challenge to run for me to run a 5K with my knees, and seems like the same for someone to do a marathon. It's something that I don't think I can do. But if you get to a point where I could jog a 5K, that'd be a great achievement for me. So you've got to set your targets according to where you're at, don't you?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. We talk a lot about the idea that people tend to start where they want to be or where they think they are, or we need to realize where we really are in terms of our health and our fitness and our abilities, and work within that range, because it'll change. You'll get better, but if you don't, you'll get injured. And then you're back to the drawing board, because you're probably disillusioned a little bit, and you're also laid up on the couch because you've done too much too soon. Yeah. So there is a lot of needing to really assess where you are truly at and working within that. And I don't want to call it a limitation, because it's not. It's just the reality of where we're at. And it's and there's nothing to be ashamed of, because we all have limitations. We all have some sort of I can't do a single leg squat to save my life, but I'm working on it. I can do a lot of other things, but I can't do that. We all have our limitations.
And that's where it's very dangerous. And we talked about, all the information you can get online. It's very dangerous comparing yourself to other people, isn't it? Yes. Because, you just don't know the circumstances. That other person has that photo shoot being taken on that day, or that video shoot, and then for the rest of the year they're a basket case. You just don't know a lot of this stuff. So I fell into it a little bit, and I've fallen into it a bit on this journey, where had some significant gains, lost quite a bit of weight, and I've started then doing a lot of push-ups and movements, and I'm still around the 140 kilos, so I'm still heavy, and I've hurt my elbow. So I think I got a bit ahead of myself. I was starting to feel good and thinking, I'm a 23-year-old again. I can do all this, and I've been restricted probably for the last 2 or 3 weeks because of that. I just too much, I think, too soon.
Yeah, Yeah, the too much too soon thing really is, I don't know if it's necessarily a modern problem, but I kind of get the feeling that it's getting worse the more that we have this instant gratification kind of society where we can take pills to cure things, and we don't have to put in the long term. I run a program that's called Way Less. It's a year-long weight loss program, but it doesn't have a meal plan. It doesn't have an exercise plan. It's all about lifestyle intervention, habit forming, habit breaking, all of that kind of stuff. And it's a hard sell because nobody wants to do something that's going to, then we tell them right off the bat, we're like, you're going to lose like half a pound a month.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is reprogramming the way that you interact or your relationship with food and movement and all that kind of stuff. It's not a quick weight loss. And people are like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that because this book, I've got a book on my desk that says you can lose a pound a day. Lose up to a pound a day. This book is screaming at me.
It's a bit of the Biggest Loser syndrome, though, isn't it? Where they get on there, they work them hard, they starve them pretty much, and they lose a lot of weight. But, you know, I spoke to Drew Manning, you know, the Fit to Fat to Fit guy, and he said, you know, unfortunately, probably 95% of those people end up being back to where they were within sort of 6 to 12 months. And I know myself in the past when I've tried to lose weight, it's always been, I'm going to do my pre-season. So 2 months, it's going to be 2 months and I'll be back. And then a month and a half into it, I'm nowhere near where I thought I'd be. And you lose heart, as you said earlier. You get despondent and you think, oh, it's not going to happen. You know, you've got to be more realistic than that, don't you?
You do. And there's so many things that go along with that accelerated weight loss. Like the reason, like, did you, a month and a half into it, was it a willpower issue? Did you just sort of run out of?
I think it was more a fact that I'd set myself a target of losing, say, 20 kilos or, you know, something crazy like that. And I'd only lost 4 or 5. And it was like, oh, this is just not happening. So
it's funny because
why bother?
That is much more realistic and much more healthy to lose that amount of weight that you lost than it is to lose the accelerated amount. Yeah. And going back to The Biggest Loser, there was a study that was done on a bunch of the first season of that show on the participants. And like you said, 95% of them were back at their starting weight or more. And one of the things that they measured in that was their resting metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories or the amount of energy that your body burns when you're just resting or just doing your normal life activities. And they had lost their weight so quickly that they had impaired their resting metabolic rate to the point, well, it had adjusted basically to be like, okay, well, we're in a starvation sort of situation, but we're also getting chased by lions every 10 minutes. So, okay, we need to really conserve whatever calories we've got. So let's downregulate the metabolism and just get everything as maintained as possible. So then when they weren't being chased by that lion, otherwise known as Jillian
Michaels, I think, is it?
Michaels, yes. Yeah. Otherwise known as Jillian Michaels. They started eating and moving about the day as they had before. But they were actually in a worse situation than before the show because they had actually damaged their metabolism and impaired their hormonal responses and stuff. So it's not only is it a failed experiment, but it's actually dangerous. Like every time you lose weight at that accelerated rate, you lose lean muscle mass as well as body fat. But when you gain it back, your body is way better at putting on fat than it is at putting on lean muscle. So your whole body composition is actually worse off than it was to begin with as well. So that yo-yo dieting is really, really bad news in general.
And it just creates a false expectation for people. You know, it's all marketing. It's all about selling products.
Yes.
And it's just that false expectation that this is achievable, because some of them on the surface look like they've done amazingly well, but they don't have the show that comes 6 months later.
Yeah.
That shows where they are, and it's the 7-minute abs, and it's just, you know, 7 weeks to your perfect beach body, all that. I know you're not a big fan of all that sort of stuff.
No, well, the thing that they forget to mention when they talk about the Tabata workouts or the perfect 7-minute workout that you only have to do 3 times a week is you can't just go and sit on the couch and eat bonbons the rest of the time. Like that is the problem that got us here in the first place, is our ancestors had to work for their food. They had to work for a living. They didn't outsource everything that they did. Like even my grandmother, they didn't have a couch big enough for everybody to sit on. People were sitting on the floor, people were out working in the fields. It was just I don't want to say harder life. It was just a more active life.
Yeah.
And we're looking at ways to use science to make up for the fact that we don't have to we don't even have to chew our damn food anymore. Like people are blending their food. They're outsourcing their chewing. We're so how lazy can you get? I think like until people started making smoothies, I thought the remote control was the downfall of society, because we can't even be arsed to get off the couch to go change the channel.
But now the blender,
we had to be able to point something, and then people get mad when it's lost because they have to get up and find the remote.
That's right. And yeah, I don't even know how to work my TV without the remote. But
well, and that's the problem. Like TVs don't even have controls on them anymore. No. At least when we were young, it was like there was a dial on the front, so you had to go and do it.
That's right. Well, when we were first married, we lost the dial on the front of our TV, so we had a pair of pliers, and we had to change. So we got used to just watching one channel. I know you've done a podcast recently where you're talking about incidental movement, and I guess that's what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
That working out is great. You know, there's a place for all that. But, you know, we've talked about this on the podcast before as well. It's just getting moving. Getting moving in your life is going to make a massive change.
Well, and when you think about it, like even at my most dedicated time when I was training for Ironman, I was working out for 90 minutes a day.
Right.
In a 24-hour period, that is nothing. That is tiny. A tiny amount of my day was spent to exercising, and it was all done in one chunk.
Right.
We're much better off spreading that out over the entire day and keeping it a lot more easy and sustainable and actually getting things done, rather than going to I love the idea of going to a place to pretend to carry something heavy from one pretend location to another, like going to the gym or riding a bike that doesn't go anywhere. Like we're so weird that way, instead of actually achieving things and doing things like walking to the grocery store and carrying our groceries home, which arguably could take you 60 minutes. You've just got 60 minutes of, first you actually got groceries, which is something you probably had to do, but you also got a lot of movement. You're carrying something heavy. You could carry it in different ways. The incidental movement just makes such a difference in terms of getting more movement into your day, but you're also getting things done. You're not setting time aside that you are swallowing like medicine because you have to. I think the more that you can build movement into your day and figure out ways to even just plain stand up and move around is a big deal at this point in our history as a humankind. But yeah, it's something that I bump up against all the time, because nobody wants to it's hard to think that way. And you have to be somewhat courageous too, to be the one person in the office who gets, like, I'm standing at a standing workstation right now.
Yeah.
I was the first one in my office back in 2009. I think I got my first standing desk, and everybody was like, oh, that's a really good idea. So 3 other people in the office got standing desks as well, but they, within a month, had stools. So all they were really doing was sitting awkwardly at these high desks. And I'm like, you guys, you're missing the point. The point was that when I'm standing, I mean, you don't want to just swap one static position for another, like sitting for standing. But by standing, I have the ability to move around more. I can squat down and read something for a little bit, or I can pace when I'm thinking. So it just gives you the ability to be a more dynamic human. And that's really my goal, that's my main message in life, really, is to bring back that dynamic movement, because energy fuels energy, and the more we move around, the more we want to move around, and just be healthier because of it.
Well,
Mentally.
your body is just as you say, your body adapts amazingly well to activity. And
Yeah.
when you're just sitting, that's when you feel your worst. I think when I get up from sitting, my knees, it takes a while. My knees just feel like they're locked in place. Everything's sore. But when you're actually up and about and moving, whether you're doing a little bit of gardening or you're playing with the dog, that sort of, it just frees everything up. And it's not a stressful exercise. So I think a lot of people get turned off by the idea of, I've got to go to the gym, I've got to go on the treadmill, or I've got to go on the roller or the bike, and that's just too hard. But if they're moving, for an extra 20, 30 minutes a day just in their normal life, that would make a massive difference, and you could build on that.
Yeah, that's the place to start. I think it's hilarious when they find out I'm a coach, or whatever they are focusing on, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I tried to get in shape a few years ago, but I hate running."
Right.
Like, so you just gave up on the whole idea of fitness because you don't like running? There's so many more things than running. Yeah. Or I hate going to the gym. Well, don't go to the gym. There's so many things that you can do outside of just like going for a jog or lifting weights. And interesting that and it's been a relatively short amount of time too. Like gyms really only came into being something for the common man in like the 60s. And even in the 60s and 70s, it was only like bodybuilders that went to gyms. So it's only been in the last 30 or 40 years that we have changed our entire way of looking at fitness as being something that has to happen in fancy clothes, with fancy equipment, in a gym setting, all those kind of things. It's wild that we've gone that far that quickly.
But it is marketing again, and I'll talk about marketing a fair bit on the podcast. Excuse me, because that the marketing of food, the marketing of fitness, and all these things has had a massive effect on certainly the Western diet and the way we live our lives these days. Because I know and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you're a great advocate for bodyweight exercises.
Mm-hmm.
You don't actually, and we say it here as well, you go to the park and find a bench or some monkey bars or something, and you can get an amazing workout.
Yeah, that's how we've done it for millions of years. I just like planting gardens, hanging from trees, carrying wood. Like we didn't have to do bench press. I mean, I will admit, like I am a bit vain and I like to have the vanity muscles. So I do go and do some bicep curls and bench press and stuff like that, but not at the expense of being able to actually like do the movements that I want to be able to do in normal life. And I always talk about, if you could, there's always the fear that there's going to be a zombie apocalypse. So
correct.
Having big biceps is probably not going to save me from the zombie apocalypse, but being able to climb over a fence or pull myself up onto a roof or something like that will save me from the zombies.
Absolutely. You want to get up high in the zombie apocalypse.
Yes, they don't climb well. Even the fast-moving ones don't seem to climb well. They just wander around below. So
bumping into things. So, you with that program you talked about earlier, the 12-month program, I've taken the approach with my weight loss that I think it's probably going to be around an 18-month, maybe 2-year journey to where I'd like to get down to around 100 kilos. But obviously, you just got to assess that as you go, and it's that can be flexible because potentially it could be less, it might be a bit more, depends on where I'm at. But the 12-month is a really good period, isn't it, to give people time to develop the habits? I guess that's pretty much what you're working on, aren't you? Is getting them into a position where it just becomes second nature to them, and then they can build on that.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you say that about having a goal weight. Like, I think a lot of people have this idea of a number on the scale that they want to see, and it is not based in any sort of reality. It's based in some sort of thing maybe they saw online. Maybe it's a previous weight that they had when they were in college or something like that, but it's not based in any sort of real reality. When we talk about like when in our program, when you've hit your goal weight in quotation marks, there's 3 criteria that it needs to fill. One is that it's sustainable.
Yeah.
The other one is that you look and feel the way that you want to look and feel, that you're comfortable with it. And the other one is that you're not at increased risk for any sort of disease, any cardiovascular disease or anything. And those are really the only three things. We don't care what that weight is. We don't care what the percentage of weight that you lost over the period of the year or 2 years or however long it took you. We just want you to fill those 3 criteria. And often people are very surprised what that number actually, or what the number appears on the scale when they feel that way.
Yeah.
When their pants are fitting nicely and they can play with their kids a little bit more easily than they were before, when their doctor isn't hounding them about their blood numbers and stuff.
Yeah.
It often comes a lot sooner or a lot easier than what they thought.
Yeah, and that's a trap you can fall into, isn't it? Where you focus on that number wholly and solely, and you don't stop and smell the roses that you've actually done a great job on the way there.
Yeah, it's like I won't be happy until I see this number on the scale. Well, that's a horrible way to live your life. What if you never get to that number on the scale? You're never going to be happy.
Yeah.
How about we be happy right now because you're moving in the right direction and you're seeing a difference. We actually get all of our participants to weigh in every single day, but then we have this program where you put in your weight and it disappears, so you don't focus on the number. And then we have a trend line that just indicates like which direction you're headed, because that's the only thing that's important.
Yeah.
Our day-to-day weight fluctuates based on, like, if I ate a big salad tonight, I'll weigh more tomorrow morning than if I ate a whole bunch of jelly beans tonight. And that's
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, it holds a lot more fiber. So like
Wow.
the salad moving through my digestive tract will bring a whole bunch of liquid into my colon, which weighs a lot more than like any amount of jelly beans I could possibly eat.
Wow.
But we know which one is healthier and is going to react in a much more positive light in the future. So we try to smooth out those bumps by just having you enter your weight, have it disappear, and just get that moving average. So at a certain point you can look back and go, hey, the last 2 weeks I've been trending down. I'm on the right track. Or what happened? I was going down for a little while there, but for the last couple of weeks I started to level out or go back up.
Yeah.
Then you can sort of look back and go, okay, well, I wasn't getting as much movement in over the last few weeks, or I had a few parties that I went to or whatever, and that's okay. But I can correct my course now and get back on track.
Yeah, and that's a big thing, isn't it? I was weighing myself pretty much every time I went to the gym. I was weighing myself. And it just started to mess with my head, though, a little bit, because there were the days when I'd put on weight and I thought I'd been eating well. And that, what you said about the jelly beans, and I haven't had any jelly beans, but yeah, you get disheartened when you think, oh, look, I've had some good days, but how can I put on weight? I'm working out, I'm eating well. I hadn't even thought about that. So, that's, if I don't get anything else out of this podcast, that's fantastic.
Well, and the other thing that people forget is they want to see instant results on the scale. So they'll have like a really good day and then they'll get on the scale in the morning really excitedly and expect it to be different. That's not how our bodies work. It takes a good 2 weeks. Like if you see a big increase in your weight, it's not fat. That doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen even in a fortnight. Like it takes time to put on body fat. That is likely water, that's fiber and water. There's all kinds of stuff that does happen quickly, but body fat doesn't come on that quickly. Right. It also doesn't come off that quickly either, which is kind of a bummer, but it's true. Like our bodies just don't move that quickly. So sort of qualifying or quantifying how good of a person you've been, and I'm afraid like there's a lot of moralistic feelings that get involved in weight loss. Yeah, that can be even more disheartening when you think you've been this virtuous person who's been eating properly and going to the gym properly, but you're not seeing it immediately on the scale. It's like, no, give it a minute. Give it a couple of weeks. Don't freak out yet. Yeah.
So I changed to then saying, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'll weigh myself every couple of weeks just to see where I'm at. And that's been a lot better. The periods where I've leveled out and nothing's changed for 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then you see a 2 or 3 kilo drop. And I think that's more, for me, that's a better way to go, just to keep that way.
Yeah, well, and as long as you're doing the weigh-ins in as controlled a circumstances as you possibly can, so choose a day of the week, make sure you do it the best time to do it is actually like as soon as you wake up, go to the bathroom, do your business, and then get on the scale right away. Don't have anything to drink, don't have anything to eat.
Yeah.
Don't do anything different. Get on the scale and try to control that circumstance as much as possible. Because if you go and eat breakfast or even have a cup of coffee or a bowel movement can be several pounds quite easily. So that can skew your numbers. If you want to fool yourself into thinking you've lost a lot of weight, then you can do that. But that's sort of that would be my advice to you, is just to try to control the circumstance. Weighing yourself at the gym, probably not getting the most true sort of representation of how you're actually moving, because likely you've had something to eat, something to drink.
Generally I head to the gym very early in the morning. I'll have water, but I don't eat before I go to the gym. I generally like to exercise on an empty stomach.
Yeah, me too.
And then I just only in the past probably month I've been on intermittent fasting. So from 11 till 7 is when I've been eating. And I've also taken on a plant-based diet. For me, I was a very big meat eater, and I don't have any problems, ethical problems, all that sort of stuff with meat. My overeating, I could see it was connected with the amount of protein and meat and stuff that I ate. So I can still
I think Australians and Canadians are the same that way. We've got some great beef in these countries.
Yeah, bacon and eggs and the whole work. So I've found that still, since I've been plant-based, I can still eat a lot. So you can still fill yourself up as long as you're not, highly processed stuff, but, broccoli and cauliflower and beans and all this sort of stuff and good green stuff. And I haven't noticed, for me, I've still been putting on muscle and so it's been working for me. And I know there's lots of different protocols out there, but for me, it seems to be working. I'm not sure if I'll stay that way forever, but it's been a very good diet for me in what I've been doing.
Yeah, well, and that is really the measuring stick that everybody should be going by. It's not what's the fad right now or what's Gwyneth Paltrow doing. It's what actually works for you, what makes you feel good, what you enjoy, and is giving you the outcome that you desire. Yeah. The more we learn about genetics, like the more the genetic tests are coming back and the microbiome tests and things like that, we're seeing more and more that everything is so individual. Like it's even beyond genetics, it's epigenetics, like flipping those switches within our genes. So sure, I'm mostly Eastern European and a little bit of Scottish. So I should be able to eat a lot of potatoes and be just fine, but I don't actually handle starches and carbohydrates on a high level very well. I'm really good with that sort of like, not necessarily low carb in comparison to the rest of North America, perhaps, but not low carb in comparison to like the ketogenic diet or something like that. Right. But I only found that out because I swung completely far in the other direction. Like I went really, really low carb, gave it a good shot, didn't work for me, upped it just a little bit, went, hey, that feels a little bit better, upped it a little bit more. It's all experimentation to find what really works for you as an individual. So I think you're doing great if you found that's working for you, both from a habitual standpoint, if you're able to eliminate the triggers for yourself, but you're also just feeling well and seeing the results. That's really the best measuring stick.
And I think that's where people need to be when they're approaching something like this. They need to be a bit more flexible in their thinking, don't they? In the sense that, okay, if you hear a lot about paleo and keto is very popular at the moment. My attitude was, this is not about peak performance. I've been there when I was a football player, and working on this is how do I get myself to work perfectly. This is not about that. I'm trying to get back to average performance because I'm starting from a long way back. And once I get to that level, then maybe I'll start looking at other things that tweak, my performance. But I personally think it's crazy for me to look at a lot of these programs where they're talking about, 5 grams of this and 20 grams of that. And I just need to get moving and start losing a little bit of weight. You know, I don't know if you agree with that, but that's how I see it.
I absolutely agree with that. I've been surrounded by the people that call themselves biohackers. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. And those folks, like, and for 2 years I went to a place on Vancouver Island that had cryotherapy and had hyperbaric chambers and infrared saunas and crazy machines of all sorts. One that took you up to 3,000 feet altitude and drops you back down every second, not literally, but changes the pressure in the chamber. And I did this stuff like quite religiously for a couple of years, and not a lot else, like just ate properly and was my normal sort of ambulatory self during the day. But then I started going and lifting some heavy weights and doing a little bit of running and doing what would be more considered like old school. And that's when people start going, "Oh man, you're looking really good." And I always look at it, one of the machine that I was talking about, that you sit in this chamber that looks like you're in a fighter pilot or a fighter jet cockpit. And it changes the bariatric the bariatric pressure up and down like crazy. I know some of the triathletes were actually using that device just before the Olympics in Rio. In fact, the woman who won the triathlon there was definitely when Jorgensen was using it. And for her, getting that 0.01% boost in oxygen carrying capacity of her blood cells is really important. Like, that's how she wins races. For a guy like me, not important at all. Like, that's not moving the needle. Yeah. And that's the way that I think that's what you were getting at as well. Like, doing those sort of tweaking your diet to the point where you're measuring every single bite of food and keeping an eye on every single macro probably isn't going to make the big differences. That's not the low-hanging fruit that you need to be looking for.
And it's not sustainable, is it? When you've got so many other habits you've got to form as well. And Rich Roll, you'd be aware of Rich Roll, the Rich Roll podcast. And, you know, he talks about people coming up to him and saying, you know, I want to do this endurance stuff and but what bike should I buy and what heart rate monitor, you know, his attitude is, well, just go out and do what you can do now with what you've got. You know, people, that's an excuse, isn't it? They're putting barriers in their own way.
Well, and it's that kind of plays back to our start where you're at kind of conversation that we had earlier, but it also is the get, like the easy fix kind of idea. Like, some people that have been to Ironman Kona, the World Championships, a few years in a row now, and I look at the start line and there's these slightly overweight fellows who are riding $10,000 bicycles. The 10 grams that they saved by spending $10,000 on the bike, well, you know what? Lose like 5 more pounds of body weight, and that's going to benefit you a lot more than that $10,000 bike would. But it's not as fun. It's not as gratifying. It's not something you can do immediately. It takes some effort. So yeah, there is I can understand. I bet Rich gets asked those kind of questions all the time because he was a world champion. It's like, I want to do what Rich does. Well, it's like Lance Armstrong's book before he got all busted on all the dope and stuff. I think the book was called "It's Not About the Bike." Yeah. And it's like, it wasn't his bike. And it turns out it wasn't necessarily him. Although some studies are showing that maybe EPO isn't as powerful as we thought. Yeah. So.
Oh, look, I think from Lance Armstrong's point of view, and I do not condone what he did, but anyway, you look at it, I think he was probably a freak out athlete anyway.
Yes, yeah.
And just that's that extra 5% or whatever you're talking about. But you've been very generous with your time. When you're talking to the people or when you're getting these people started, say on that 12-month program or just general coaching clients, obviously you look at where they're at physically and what levels they're at. But just for our listeners that are thinking about, I need to make a change. It's come to the point I need to get fit. I need to get healthy. We've got the Get Fit guy on the podcast. We've got to ask the question, what would you recommend? You know, what would be the top 2 or 3 tips just to get them up and moving, get them going?
Well, okay. I think one of the things that made a huge difference, and I've written about this several times, just because it surprised me. I didn't actually do it in order to become more healthy, but selling my car was one of the things.
I heard that podcast. Yep.
Yeah, it's funny because like we really just sold our car because we were moving across the country and we weren't sure that we actually would need it and stuff. But after a year or so of not having the car, we're like, this is amazing. This is great. I was riding my bike everywhere. I was walking places, even taking the subway or a car share program. Just made it so that I had to, and it built into my life. I had to use my legs and use my arms and use my ingenuity to figure out how I was going to run errands or get to the office or whatever. And I don't necessarily think that everybody needs to go out and sell their car unless you want to, and it saved a lot of money, I gotta say. It was a good thing financially as well as health-wise, but just taking that out of the equation occasionally, say 75% of the time, if you find yourself grabbing your keys and just heading for your car, just take that moment and think, do I really need the car? Like, can I walk and get this done? Could I take my bike and get this done? Could I turn this into an excursion with the family instead of just being a solo run to the grocery store for whatever it is?
Yeah.
The other day I was helping a friend of mine he doesn't have a drinking problem, but he's trying to cut back on his drinking. And we made a deal that he wouldn't keep alcohol in the house at all. If he wanted to drink bad enough that he would walk to the liquor store or the bottle shop and pick up whatever he wanted and bring it home, then that's great. That's fine.
Yeah.
Do that. But we had to put that extra little hurdle in the way of it's not already in your house, so you have to leave the house. So that means you have to really want it.
Yes.
And then number 2 was he couldn't jump in his car and go. He has to walk to the liquor store. And it's made a huge difference, not only for his habit of having that evening drink, but he's now getting all this extra exercise if he actually does want like some extra movement in his day, if he does want beer, which kind of in a way kind of justifies having that beer or that bottle of wine or whatever as well.
Balances each other up. Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of mindset that I want to see people start adopting, is that idea of not having a car, choosing 75% of the time. If you find yourself jumping in the car, think about a different way that you might get it done, and change your habitat to the point where you understand, like, let's say it's not alcohol, it's ice cream. You can do the same thing as my friend did with the alcohol, with the ice cream. Don't keep it in the house. Make sure, don't eliminate it. Don't be unrealistic and say, I'm never eating ice cream again. That's it. Done. Because that doesn't work. We know that doesn't work, especially if you love ice cream. Yeah. Why would you do that to yourself? The problem, ice cream isn't the problem. Too much ice cream is the problem.
Correct. Same with chocolate. The chocolate would be a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, just putting some sort of mindset, habitat, environmental change in place that you can either change the habit, make the habit into much more of a healthy one, or just actually like not do it at all. But don't try and make it, don't try to go cold turkey. Don't try to use willpower. We know that willpower is a fickle mistress. Like, some first thing in the morning, willpower is amazing. Last thing in the evening, willpower is like, screw you, do what you want.
That's right. It's party time.
Yeah. So don't rely on willpower. Sometimes it's great. I think it's a great muscle to flex, but don't rely on it.
Rely on that. Yeah.
Try to use some other things. So I think that was sort of 3 things kind of mushed into one there.
No, and that's great. And I asked the question to most of the guests, and a lot of the people that are in the industry, whether they're fitness trainers and the like. What's been really refreshing is no one has come out and said, well, you have to do 100 sit-ups and 100 push-ups in the morning and you have to run 5Ks every day. No one's said any of that. It's all been about,
that's great.
Why are you doing it? And just get moving. Exactly what you're saying, build some habits around movement. And you can work those other things into that movement if you want to, but just get moving, So it's been really refreshing. So I think there's probably been a bit of a shift in the fitness, certainly the trainers I've spoken to.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear you say that. Either you've been choosing very intelligent guests, or we've got
to lift the IQ of the podcast somehow. So I've got to get some smart people on. No, that's great. So that's really incidental movement, isn't it? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, incidental movement, but don't make it meaningless. Like if you make it part of your day and something that's actually achieving an outcome or a checking a thing off your to-do list, you're much more likely to make it a sustainable thing
to do
than
it.
like a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm going to take a 15-minute walk after dinner every night this week. I'm like, that's great. And that's probably really fun. But if you build some sort of a reason for it, other than I just know this is a good thing for me to do for my health, you're more likely to keep it sustainable.
To do it. Exactly. Brock, thank you so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it. And I say this to majority of my guests. I'd love to check in with you again in the future because I think there's so much more to talk about. Where can people find you? Where can our listeners find you, whether it's on, iTunes, online, where can they find you?
The easiest place to find me is brockarmstrong.com.
Okay.
On there, I've got my blog, I've got my coaching business and stuff. And from there, you can find the Get Fit Guy, find my articles on Scientific American. Even though I'm Canadian, they allowed me to pretend to be an American. Scientific Canadian, we should start a...
Yeah.
Anyway. And I have a couple other podcasts. I have a podcast called Workplace Hero that's currently on hiatus, but that was a project of mine for about 1.5 years that you can find there as well. I'm filling in as guest host on the Endurance Planet podcast for the last 6 months or so.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm all over the place, but brockarmstrong.com is probably the easiest place because it'll send you in all kinds of different directions.
Brilliant. So we'll put that all in the show notes, etc. And just as an aside, podcasting for me has been amazing. It's really, meeting fabulous people like yourself and just getting messages on Instagram or Facebook about, I've listened to your podcast. It's really helped me. It's really been a life-changing experience for me. How have you found it? You're obviously deep into the podcasting culture. So how have you found that?
I absolutely love it. I started listening to podcasts in 2003.
Wow.
Back when you had to get the stupid little RSS feed, put it into your browser. It would give you this awful looking XML page where you have to download an MP3 file to your desktop and then somehow drag it onto your whatever device you had. I had a little Trio. It was like what was this thing called? Palm Pilot.
Yes.
And I could listen to music on that. So I'd have to drag it onto the SD card in there. And it was just ridiculous.
Hard work.
I loved it. I fell in love with the medium immediately because you could get information there that you couldn't really find anywhere else. You could curate it yourself. It really just kind of changed my life in some ways. And I came from a background in audio through my music, and eventually just started reaching out to some of my favorite podcasts and saying, hey, I'm an audio engineer. Can I help you out with your podcast? It could be a lot smoother, a lot better sounding. Yeah. And I think at this point I've launched, close to 20 different podcasts. And at one point was producing 12 different shows at once. And eventually sort of took the step from being the guy behind on this side of the mic, the non-hearing you side of the mic, to the side where you talk into the microphone. And
fantastic.
Kind of I didn't really know that was going to be my goal when I got into it, but it's been even more fulfilling being the voice as well as the technician. And
it's for what we're doing in terms of trying to move, get fit, and it's fantastic to be able to have someone in your ear or just as a companion, a training partner, and learn something while you do it. Yeah. Yeah. I was surprised. I saw some statistics the other day from, I think it was Edison Research did a podcast survey, and the majority of people listened to podcasts in their house, which surprised me. Followed closely by commuting, and then way down the list was working out or going to the gym or doing exercise. And I was just blown away because that's the greatest thing about podcasts for me is when I go out for a long walk or when I go out for a long bike ride or whatever, I can put a podcast on where I normally wouldn't listen to music because it's unsafe. I wouldn't hear the traffic around me. With the podcast, I don't feel unsafe. So
It's interesting though, but I think commuting is that didn't surprise me. I think
No.
listening to podcasts on your commute is probably a lot better than listening to terrestrial radio.
Absolutely.
At you to buy mattresses or something crazy.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, thanks, Brock. I really appreciate it, mate. And we'll definitely touch base with you again.